couple of weeks ago, I did a follow-up video where I addressed your comments and questions on a previous topic I covered. You guys really liked it. I enjoyed doing it. I'm going to keep it up. This is my follow-up to my video on gatekeepers, how to spot and avoid them. Hi, welcome back to Not So Obvious Watchers. I'm Pete McConville. As I said in the intro, this is my follow-up to my Gatekeepers video, how to spot and avoid them. I'm going to get straight into answering some of your questions. The first one, or points, and the first one was from James Duffy, and Carl M kind of came in over the top of it, saying that another sign of a gatekeeper is a kind of absolutist, an inability to understand doubt or that another person can have a different point of view. Could not agree more. I should have had that on my my list. If anyone's really certain about anything and cannot accept that there might be an alternative viewpoint, that's a very bad sign, and you might want to be very careful around how you deal with that person. The next question was raised by Red Castles. Now, Red Castles was very careful in how he phrased it. It was very almost apologetic. And I understand why, but there was no need to be. His question was the point he raised was quite observant, and the question was very pertinent. And that was, given my collection, given where I sit and the watches I buy, was I simply being a bit autobiographical and frankly a little bit defensive about my collection and the way other people may talk about it? I actually thought about, first off, I have no problems with that question. It's a very good one, and such a good one. It's one I asked myself very carefully before I did that video. I was very careful to sort of put aside all of my brands, put aside what I do as a collector, and try and look broader at things. So I would answer this in a couple of different ways. The first is, most of the examples, all of the examples I found could be, you would see day to day in dealing with brands that either I don't collect or some of them are way out of my price range. Ulysse Nardin, Hublot, Girard-Perregaux, Grand Seiko, Omega, all are kind of victims of this gatekeeping kind of behavior of being accused of being homages or trash brands or all sorts of things. So those, I was very cautious to make sure that the kinds of claims, kind of behaviors I saw were being applied to brands outside of my own collection. The second thing I would say is, as a vintage watch collector, you're kind of removed from a lot of this. This behavior frankly doesn't happen in the vintage watch community. As soon as you mention that you've got vintage watches, all of that other rubbish tends to just go away, and it doesn't. But what that does do is it throws into sharper relief kind of what happens in, I'll call it, the new watch area. The final point that I would raise is a lot of the behaviors I saw and commented on actually happen within brands, not even sometimes within brands, but within communities. So there will be the old guard who can't accept that a new group of people coming into that brand might see things differently, might not value what the old guard within that brand wanted. So I've seen that within Breitling communities, I've seen that within Fortis communities, I've seen that within Seiko communities, and I've also seen it within, as I said, non-brand communities. This happened a lot. A lot of this gatekeeping happens within, for example, the Hodinkee forums, where it's quite routine for people that are defending or taking a certain viewpoint on questions that Hodinkee raise, often, or even with respect to Hodinkee, like on the travel clock, for example, will often use these behaviors to try and disenfranchise some people's opinions. And so, like I said, I don't I tried very hard to make sure that my comments about gatekeepers were not autobiographical and not simply me being defensive. Like I said, I can't disprove that charge. If you want to think that this is all just that it was, I can't convince you otherwise. But all I can say is I tried very hard to remove myself from that. Spring in Fialta asked a question about whether the behaviors of some YouTubers were kind of acting as a gatekeeper as well by the fact that through their collecting habits, they somehow were trying to surreptitiously shape the discussion, shape the collecting community, even though they might say that other watches are good. So they might say, oh, look, a Grand Seiko is okay, or a Hublot is okay, or whatever. But then when you look at their state of the collection videos, all they have is Rolex. And is that a form of gatekeeping? I don't think so. I think that is really unfair. I think that in what you're doing there is creating a situation where the YouTuber can't win. If they only speak well of the brands that they happen to buy, then clearly they're not being objective. If they do speak well of brands they don't buy, then clearly they're being hypocritical. I think that's, as I say, grossly unfair to a YouTuber. I think you should be able to separate what you think about watches from how you choose to collect as a personal preference. I believe you can do those two. In fact, I'll go further. I don't think you can do those two things. I think if you're going to get on YouTube and put it out and put your opinions out there, being able to separate what you think is good from what you personally buy is essential. And if you can't do that, you probably don't have any business having a YouTube channel. Ristoros asked an interesting question, not really relevant, but it was more an observation on the side of a point I raised. When I spoke about, for example, the new Rolex homages, the new Rolex Submariners being a homage to the previous Rolexes, he questioned about whether that was a fair comparison. Can someone produce a homage of their own design? Surely a homage can only be done by someone from the outside. I think that question, I can see where that question comes from within our watch community, but I think it also to me, it's kind of sad because what it shows is just how much we've kind of distorted the meaning of the word homage. A homage is affectionate or respectful. It really is best coming from people within the tent. Any designer who's designing the next iteration of a watch, you would want them to be respecting what came before. You would want them to have some affection for the previous models. That is the very definition of a homage. It's actually quite difficult to truly do a homage from outside the tent. The idea of being respectful, of taking influences and respecting those influences, but from a different agency, from a different designer, from a different creator, is actually really challenging. And I think that's why we struggle so much sometimes in this space. A couple of you raised the question about, is this all a bit of a storm in a teacup? This is, after all, just a watch. Maybe we shouldn't care quite so much. I can't really address that right now. That's a whole video I'm in the process of making. But all I can say is I'm really suspicious of, I don't really like that claim of it's just a watch. For me, it's kind of in there with it's just an opinion. That feels like it's not taking this seriously enough. It feels like it's a bit dismissive and it's kind of excusing, frankly, poor behavior. So I'll do a whole video on why I don't like the expression, it's just a watch. But all I'll say now is, yeah, that's not a sentiment I share, and it's not one I would encourage on this channel. And the final thing I'd point out is I got trolled, which probably should come as absolutely no surprise given the topic. The troll did started by asking, I think it was a legitimate question, which was a shame because it was a topic worth investigating, which is the red flags, the yellow flags I was raising, things like using the word shitter, using the word homage, odious comparisons, that sort of thing. Surely they can be a legitimate way of educating other people, and that we should not just discount people at first blush for saying that. I completely agree. That's why I think I said it about 20 times in my previous video, that in every case bar one, those things I was mentioning were warning signs. They weren't red flags. They were amber warning lights. And I'll say that again right now. All of those things I mentioned do not lead to you, with the exception of being the comment counter, should not lead to you kicking someone out of your little conversation group. Deal with them, engage with them, keep seeing where they're going. What they are, though, are warning signs where you need to be cautious about what's coming next. It could be that someone is using those things with all the best will in the world, trying to educate, trying to share, and just their vocabulary is jarring. So don't dismiss people out of hand. But as I said, they're warning signs, they're tips, they're not tripwires that will set off a mine. The reason why this guy it turned out to be a troll is because as that conversation developed, he was clearly, deliberately misreading, misrepresenting me, and then openly admitted to lying to me in a comment to try and trick me into saying something. As far as I'm concerned, that's trolling. I've blocked him, and good riddance. I won't miss this guy ever. But I bring this up because I want to talk about the last comment that I'm going to touch on. One of the commenters, I think it was George and Bryson, raised the question of, should we really be seeking to avoid these people? Maybe we should be educating them and so forth. I would say that in most cases, they're not interested in being educated, because to be educated means to change. And the one thing that gatekeepers don't want, the one thing they fear more than anything else, is the idea that they're not in control and they may need to change. Now, look, if you want to try and educate your way out of it, that's fine. Go right ahead. Personally, I've found that those kind of people, that kind of behavior, if it is truly gatekeeping, these people, as I said, aren't interested in learning. So if you want to have a go for your boot, go for your life. I don't mind. And if you're successful, I'll cheer you on. My gut feel, my personal experience is it's not worth it, and I just wield the ban hammer. Anyway, that's it. I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watchers. I probably won't come back to this. I don't plan on doing follow-ups to follow-ups, but leave questions, comments more below. And generally these topics do recycle. So what you might have seen is, like, some of the topics I discussed like last year as well. If you do leave comments below, I will pick them up next time I look at this and see if I can add, subtract, change in some way. I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watchers, and I'll see you later. Bye.